If you are going to have a view of affecting Indigenous education for the better, then you'd better include Indigenous peoples.
Yes, sir.
When did he become the minister?
The Manitoba government has outlined its second attempt at overhauling the province's education system after Premier Heather Stephenson scrapped Bill 64, the Education Modernization Act, last year. The focus this time around is on high-quality learning, student engagement, teaching, and responsive systems.
Fox.
But there is also a large focus on improving school experiences for Indigenous students, with the province creating an Indigenous education framework.
What's lovely to see is that there is reflected in this is an interest in Indigenous education, Indigenous students and families and communities.
Professor Frank Deere says the focus on Indigenous education is important. The province is enhancing its content on residential schools and treaties and is planning to better recruit and retain teachers in rural and northern Manitoba communities. Deere questions whether the province's words will be put into action and says they are missing a key focus in investments into Indigenous language education.
Some work needs to be done in the near and long term in order to acquire a labor force in education that could minister to the needs of Indigenous language instruction.
Manitoba Teachers Society President James Bedford is happy to see a focus on Indigenous education, but says this entire education plan is 2 years too late.
It's good to finally see those recommendations being talked about. It's good to know how they finally feel about them.
Bedford says some key elements were missing.
We have some of the highest childhood poverty rates within the country. The minister, I think, spoke to addressing some of the needs of poverty within the system. We've been advocating for a universal meal program for years now.
Not only do advocates want to see Indigenous content in schools, but also an emphasis on student retention. High school graduation rates for non-Indigenous versus Indigenous students is staggering. Just over 50% of Indigenous students graduated in 2020, compared to more than 90.8% of non-Indigenous students who graduated on time. Deere says poverty plays a big role in these numbers, but so too does intergenerational trauma.
The parents and the grandparents of students right now have either directly or indirectly experienced the Indian residential school experience. So those sort of things occur.
The province says specific details on this framework will be announced in the next few weeks. In Winnipeg, Alex Karpa, City News.